Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Prosperity Through Multifamily Real Estate Investing Podcast. I am your host, Real Estate Cody, and with me, as always, Mr. Coffee Connoisseur, Brian Alfaro. What's up, buddy?
Mr. Real Estate Cody, what is up? Good morning.
Ah, man, another great morning, another great conversation we're about to have. Looking forward to it, and really excited to be back in the swing of things. I feel like it's been a while since we've done some recordings, and so it's good to be back in the hot seat. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, it's always great networking with other high quality people like Mr. Jonathan here and just expanding our network and educating our listeners as well.
Definitely, man. Well, let's jump right in. Who we talking to today?
All right, today in the hot seat, we have Mr. Jonathan Barr. Jonathan started his real estate career during the 2009 recession. I'm looking forward to peeling back that onion a little bit. He has been involved in the acquisitions of over 400 residential flips in the competitive Los Angeles market. During that time, he was also involved in ground up developments and repositioning multifamily buildings. During that 10-year period, 22 million in profits were created with an average yearly return of 38%. Along with his brother Jeff at JB2, they invest in 70 plus unit value add projects in the CB complexes in B emerging neighborhoods, $3 to $10 million in the purchase price. JB2 invests along with investors in higher cash flow landlord friendly markets. JB2 currently has a building in Kansas City and another in Norman, Oklahoma in the OKC Metro, and they are looking for more opportunities like this. Mr. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. And now we actually have our second Oklahoma deal to add to that.
Awesome.
So
congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I love hearing successful momentum stories, man. That's great. Congratulations on that. And I know we were talking before the show, all that in addition to adding to your family here very soon with the birth of another child. So congrats on that, man.
Second daughter coming, girl dad all the way.
I can relate to that. I will tell you that's tougher than any other aspect of life. Multifamily is a walk in the park compared to raising some daughters, but they're fun. They melt your heart for sure. But
oh yeah, lots of love for sure.
Lots of love, man. That's absolutely right. So Brian will know that one day. I'm trying to encourage him to hold off just a little bit longer, but it's coming soon for him.
You need him full force for now.
That's right. That's exactly right. But well, Jonathan, man, great to have you here. And, it's been a pleasure knowing you for the last several months, man. Tell the listeners a little bit more about your background and your introduction into the multifamily space.
Yeah. So kind of Brian touched on it a bit, but yeah, grew up in a real estate family, actually, that my family has been involved in flips since I was born. Joined the family business after the last recession, graduated from college, couldn't find a job. My mom was like, come work for us. Reluctantly, I did because no one wants to work for their parents. And it was a great experience. We were at a point where we were buying 7-8 homes a month in Los Angeles for dirt cheap comparing to what you could buy a property in LA today. And then also transitioned into some development ground up townhouse style homes near downtown Los Angeles. Also had a small portfolio of 30 to 40 units in Los Angeles that I manage and lease myself. So I've kind of been in the trenches as well. Bought a few duplexes in that 2010-12 time period that appreciated 400% and have since sold all 3 of those duplexes that I've 1031 into buildings in the Midwest, one in Kansas City, one in Oklahoma City, and now our second acquisition, Oklahoma City. And so my brother and I are that partnership separate from the family business now. And so we've been selling some properties in LA to buy stuff in the Midwest, and now have started to raise money from other people because we don't have unlimited money and we're trying to grow things. And that's where we're at. We're trying to, we keep things a little bit smaller, trying to do a few deals a year, nothing crazy, but it still adds up and is powerful, and just want to bring some people along the way with us.
Yeah, I love it, man. A lot of success there, a lot of experience in multiple different strategies within real estate investing. Yeah. And I got to tell you, man,
I've been through the ringer, let's say.
which is great, man. I think you need that experience, right? But I will tell you, and Brian, we've talked about this before, right? Where wholesalers and flippers, I feel like deserve a lot of respect, especially the ones that can hit those economies of scale, because man, that is such a grind. That is such a labor intensive strategy. both strategies. So like you said, 400 plus homes.
I agree, but we had good systems in place that it wasn't as much of a grind, and plenty of people in place in different roles that it didn't feel like we're dying, but it's definitely it's a full-time job. For sure.
Well, and that leads me into a very good point talking about systems, and that does differentiate the difference between those who kind of get in and get out real quick versus those who actually make a scalable model. Because it's I feel like, especially with those who are scaling a flip business, there's very few far in between that actually hit that level of scale. And then, like you said, it's typically because of those systems that they have in place. Because without that, man, it's like I said, it is a grind for sure.
Yeah, most flippers are fly by night, do a few deals here and there. They don't make an actual business out of it and doing it on a regular basis consistently, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool, man. Well, I know that you kind of went through a variety of different strategies here. You ended up finding yourself into the multifamily space here around the Midwest. Talk to us a little bit more about the thesis behind making that transition from going from a very scalable model, which you had, into now targeting, commercial real estate.
Yeah, like you said, the flip business is a full-time job. You got to be on site twice a week at the projects. And when you have 30 projects going on at one time, can be pretty grueling. And then after overhead and paying ordinary income taxes on the money you're making there's really little left. And 10 years later, it's like you have to keep on going. You have to do, we had to do 2 deals a month just to pay for everything, and it's a grind, especially in this competitive market where it's so hard to find deals, and they were getting tighter and tighter and tighter as the years went by. And so I had, like I said, I bought a few duplexes, and those were kind of paying for my living expenses for the most part. And then I started looking at, okay, now these properties have appreciated 400%. I have a ton of equity in these properties. What is my actual return on that equity? Not just the money I put into it. And the return on it was probably 3%. And I was like, I know I can do better than this. And I started looking in LA for like 8 to 10 unit buildings. But in Los Angeles, you have rent control. So I would have to go into a building, move out all the tenants, pay them about $50 a tenant to move because of rent control, gut it, redo everything. And then you have a good asset in the primary market. And obviously there's benefits to that. But I started looking, I was in Kansas City with my wife for Christmas because she has family there. Started looking around, talking to brokers and doing some numbers. And I was like, holy crap, I can get similar numbers to what I would get in LA after I do all this stuff without doing, 3/4 of what I'm having to do in LA. And then I did it, and 3 times my cash flow from my duplex in LA to the 14 unit I bought in Kansas City, and it just like light bulb blew up, and I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. I need to do more of this.
Yeah, it's funny because we talk to a lot of our investor database or connections that are in California, and we refer to California as kind of like it's a money state, definitely not a deal state, right?
Yeah. There's definitely lots of opportunities and a lot of cool things going on, and yeah, properties can appreciate really well if they're in the right neighborhoods and you buy at the right time. But yeah, cash flow is not king in California.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're definitely looking in some of the target markets that we're actually interested in here across the Midwest. We like Kansas City as well. We're based out of Texas as well. But, you highlighted a point a minute ago, just this competitive landscape that we're now in post-COVID. It is absolutely astonishing. I feel like every day just to see the steep competition that's entering into all aspects of commercial real estate. So how are you guys navigating through, this level of competition that we're seeing?
I mean, it's pretty challenging. I'm not going to lie, but we're just keeping constant communication with the brokers that we've done deals with, new brokers. We actually also hired a third party to help us call owners on our behalf directly. I talk to owners directly sometimes, especially what we do is when we buy a property, we'll talk to all the owners that are within, like around our property. Hey, we just bought this. We're looking to acquire more. yada yada. I just wanted to also introduce myself as neighbors, that kind of thing. And just being active on social media, on real estate Twitter, actually, like that. The last deal we just bought came from a broker introduction from a lender that I met on Twitter. So just being active in the space and people knowing that you're working the market, sometimes they'll bring you deals that way as well.
That's a pretty cool nugget there. What do you think, Brian? I think that's good. Like you close an asset and then you're reaching out to other owners in the area to introduce yourself and just kind of be a presence and top of mind, so to speak. Just hopefully, I'm assuming catching them at the right whim if they're looking or considering to sell or trade or whatnot. I mean, that's a pretty good little nugget there. What do you think?
Yeah, I like that. It's all about top of mind awareness, right? It's a similar strategy you can use when you're flipping houses or buying rentals, right? You buy the house, you go knock on the neighbor's door next door, and you say, "Hey, just want to let you know I'm gonna be renovating this house. I buy houses. I'm an investor, whatever. If you're ever interested, here's my business card, no pressure." And you might take you 6 months, or even might take you 2 years.
Your neighbor Sally over here sold us her house.
And it's the same with multifamily, right? And you just plant that seed and you water it, essentially, is what you need to do, because they might not sell for 12, 18, 24, 36 months, but they're going to be a day maybe where they think, you know what, it's time. And having that conversation and nurturing that relationship, just like you would with a passive investor, just touching base with them, even if it's just once a year, just saying, "Hey, how's it going over there? How's your property doing? Just want to grab lunch or whatever, so we can share some stories or share some maybe some ideas on how we can improve our properties." And you just build that relationship so that one day when the time's ready, they might give you first dibs or at least first look at it before they potentially put it on the market, which helps.
Yeah, for sure. Like in the flip business, we bought 5 houses on one street within 6 months of each other. And right now on our 72 unit deal that we bought in September, I'm talking to the owner that owns a 54 unit next to us and then a 16 unit in front of it.
It works.
That we could kind of like, that's the thing too. If you buy a neighboring property, you also have economies of scale, and you might not even need an extra staff. You might be able to even use the staff on the other property, kind of like share on those resources, which is huge as well. But that owner is like retiring, isn't quite ready. But like you said, just nurturing, like every time I'm in Oklahoma City, I try to like go to coffee with him or whatever, and just kind of be top of mind, and kind of keep that relationship going because one day he will be ready. And when he's like you said, when he's ready, he'll think of us.
Yeah. And, there's another aspect to this too, right? Is like you said, developing relationships with other owner operators in your market. And let's say it doesn't translate into a transaction down the road. If anything, it develops a relationship between two business owners on the same street who can help collectively work together to improve the communities or the resident experience or whatever you guys are doing. I know for us on the recent deal that we closed on our partnership, the owner, we're one of 3 assets on the same street. And the owner of one of the assets across the street had reached out to us and said, "Hey, let's grab some lunch. Let's figure out a way that we can collaborate to help enhance the security of the location of the assets and different things with the resident experience and such." And so I think that's a good opportunity to capitalize on when you can build those relationships with other community influencers, so to speak, in the business.
Yeah, and they have resources that you might be able to use and vice versa. Or I was looking at another property down the street, and that owner's units were exactly like the other property I was looking at. And so just being able to talk to him about his units and what he's renting it for, if how it's going, does he rent them quickly, et cetera, is really powerful information.
Sure, definitely. And I want to go back and highlight another point that you made, and I think it's absolutely pivotal in when it comes to like broker relations, right? Which is that where most of your deal flow is coming from? Is through broker relations?
Now, yeah, but yeah, I think keeping up with those relationships, like checking in with them every other week, email, phone calls, like they have so many buyers talking to them. You need to stay top of mind, or else they're just going to forget about you.
Well, and that was exactly the point I was going to lead into, because it's interesting that, we refer to the broker's short list, so to speak. I feel like now that short list is ever evolving and growing because there's so many other operators in the space now. Right. And so you cannot understate the importance of that follow up and that constant engagement and that constant presence is top of mind, because like you said, you're going to get weeded out very, very quickly, especially with the amount of people chasing opportunities in this market cycle for sure.
Yeah, and I also, when I close something, I let all the brokers know that we just bought something. So as they see that you're buying more in that market, they see you as a player, and they almost like, well, why didn't you work with us? Or like, why didn't we get that deal? Or like, what happened? Or I was actually talking to that owner. How did you get it? And then it starts a conversation and dialogue, and they see that you're a real player and they want to work with you.
Yeah, one thing that we found to be absolutely critical is adding all of our brokers to our newsletter list. And, maybe some of them don't read it, some of them don't open it, whatever the case may be. But point of that is you never know who's watching, right? You never know who's paying attention. And it's interesting because the second they see you, like you said, either you have something under contract or you close something, man, phone calls start coming in, text messages start coming in, emails start coming in, and like people are constantly watching what you're doing. So you don't want to discount that and keeping them, engaged with what you're doing for sure.
Yeah, I don't have them on our newsletter. That might be a good one for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it helps. It was so surprising. I know when we got this opportunity, like the second we announced that we closed, man, it was just a flood of just like communication coming in from people that we didn't expect or we didn't know that we're watching, things like that. So definitely think it's a good nugget for anybody that's listening is, make sure those guys are on your database, and whether that be newsletters or blogs, whatever it is you're doing, make sure that they know that what is, keeping up to date on what you're doing in your business. So
yeah, they're usually going to be following you on like LinkedIn or something. So they keep tabs on people for sure.
Yeah. I agree.
Or I see them like something I posted. I was like, okay, they're looking at my stuff,
Yeah. We talk about this all the time, man. You just never know who's watching. So you gotta be out there. So, well, cool, man. And speaking to again, kind of sticking on the topic of the level of competition in the marketplace, we were talking about this before the show. It is getting harder and harder to find not only opportunities, but give yourself a competitive advantage with the competitive pool that's out there. Are there any tricks or anything that you're doing aside from just staying top of mind that's giving you a competitive advantage in winning opportunities?
Yeah, so our approach is more long-term, where we want to hold for 10 plus years, but with refinancing within 5 years and returning most of the capital at that point. So you're de-risked at that point. But the reason why that helps us is because we could underwrite on longer time periods, where it's more about the cash flow over a longer time period. So that allows us to be a little bit more aggressive, and we're going after, and because of that, we can go after stabilized assets that maybe aren't being run that well. That, like the last deal we bought, they weren't using any software, so they're doing everything by hand for the most part. So bringing in systems like that is making us able to cut staffing there. And they don't market online. So just marketing the property online is going to be huge. We're going to be able to hit rental prices that they weren't able to hit just with that fact alone. So all these little things on a stabilized asset aren't much alone, but once you start adding up, it becomes a value add proposition for that property. When most indicators, they're flipping the deal in 5 to 7 years, they need to have pretty substantial rent bumps to be able to hit the values that they need in year 5 to 7 to sell and hit the return metrics, when we don't have to do that. So we actually kind of try to avoid kind of more value add stuff. We like the stuff that's stabilized, that we can go in and tweak stuff and make it better. Value add stuff are getting, the pricing's crazy, and I'm like, well, I'm going to pay a crazy price for something that has huge risk because I have to do a huge construction project. If anyone's done any big construction projects, they know that you open up a wall, you're going to have surprises. It's going to be over budget. It's going to take longer, and that hurts returns.
Cody, that's something that we have been talking about for many months now.
I was going to say, doesn't that sound so familiar?
It sounds super familiar. Our saying is very similar, Jonathan. If I'm going to overpay, I'm going to overpay for something nice, right? I want something nice that I can be proud to own. And same thing, we're looking for those we call them light value add, more operational plays, just so, nobody knows after a year like COVID. Nobody knows what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. You get conflicting news articles coming, from, are they raising interest rates? Are they doing this? Are they doing that? And there's so many
cap rates can expand.
There's so many theories out there right now that one of the safest things you can do is just buy and hold, for as long as that makes sense for you and your group, or you and your investors, and to buy something that people are proud of and that's stabilized over time. Because especially with things, we're seeing all the news releases about how crazy inflation is. The best thing you could be doing right now is buying real estate, parking your capital in a piece of property and just letting it ride.
Yeah, I mean, that granted, you do have to have some ability to do some rent bumps and other efficiencies, like cutting expenses. Like our first Oklahoma deal, we cut expenses by 25% because they're spending all this money on marketing costs. Insurance was too high. Staffing was too high. So a combination of those things is about $100,000 to $12,000 in reductions we did in that first year, which is huge.
Our audience has probably heard us speak over the last several episodes in regards to this topic, but I feel like the value add strategy moving into this decade is definitely on the operational efficiency side versus just going in there and expecting you're going to hike rents by $200-$300, right? And I think that it's very rare that you come across that first generational value add play, right? That hasn't been touched, or it's still classic vintage. Those opportunities are far few in between, I feel like now. And so, you're getting properties that have been traded hands, 2, 3, 4, 5 times over the past decade. And there's all been some type of value add strategy implemented. So I think, to your point, the value add strategy is definitely going to be more on the operational side versus in just the construction side or things like that. But, you brought up another cool point too that I like, is because we've been seeing this more often, where you're seeing longer term holds, right, in underwriting, or you're seeing more creativity in the equity stack or waterfall structures and things like that. But I think to your point, when you're modeling on a longer term hold, it gives you a lot more runway, to absorb some of that downside risk, so to speak,
and fluctuations in the market, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's definitely another good nugget to take away too, is looking at how do you model that out and getting creative and looking at longer term holds. Because I think the traditional typical value add strategy, where, like you said, you buy and hold for 3 years, 5 years, and then you exit, it is getting increasingly harder to underwrite to that right now.
Yeah, and the other difference with us is we're heavily investing into every single one of our deals. That I think the reason why people want to sell sooner is because syndicators a lot of time make most of their money on the sale, when we're actually making a decent amount of cash flow because of the money that we have invested too. So we're kind of in the boat together, and we actually want to stay in it. We don't want to get that exit and have to pay a huge amount of tax.
Yeah. Man, just a lot of wisdom here, because I think for anybody that's listening that's considering passively investing, that brings up a whole nother point of, alignment of interest and incentives for the GPs, right? It sounds like in your model, being so heavily invested, your alignment is with the LPs, right? It's not just an incentive-based model where you have to go do a capital event or exit and transact so you can get paid. It sounds like you guys are right in line with what your limited partners are doing as well.
Yeah, our waterfall at refinance, we do change the split slightly, but the reason why we do that incentivizes us to get to that point and return capital sooner than later.
Yeah. I like that, man. Like a lot of wisdom shared there. That's great nugget. So let's pivot a little bit here. And I know we were talking before the show, you made it from the single family space. You've done, flips and developments, and then now the multifamily, you're buying acquisitions across the Midwest, but you're also open to other alternative asset classes in addition to multifamily, right? Yeah, I think you mentioned you're looking at some retail spaces, correct?
Yeah, we're exploring it. We haven't. If we do that, we'll probably do it with our own capital, just to kind of experiment first before we take anyone else's money. Just that's how we feel we should do it. But yeah, how we look at retail is if we could buy some retail close to the apartments we already own, they'll kind of feed off each other. It could even give jobs to our tenants, could improve the neighborhood. It could help boost rents, et cetera, et cetera. And so I know a couple other people in retail that have done really well, even during COVID, even when people are saying retail is dead. So it's kind of counterintuitive, but that's, you got to go where other people aren't going to find new opportunities, because as we know, the multifamily space is, I would say, saturated, and it's pretty challenging to find deals. Not to say that we're not going to keep down that space, but we kind of want to have like another secret weapon in our repertoire, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Brian, did you pick up on that thing he mentioned though? Like, when you're talking about retail space, you mentioned like, hey, this could be a potential employer for some of our residents. Like, I like that train of thought of trying to give back to the community using alternative asset classes. That's pretty unique, man. I like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I mean, there's so many ways. As real estate investors, I always say our main job is to solve problems. It's really what we're doing, right? And whether it's somebody's living space or somebody's working space, we're going to invest in real estate. There's an opportunity on both sides. So maybe you're buying some, small triple net properties or small retail properties, and then if it's vacant, leasing it to quality tenants, which will in then turn provide quality jobs to the neighborhood, which will then turn provide tenants to the buildings that you own, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of goes back full circle that if you can sort of double dip in my head and both asset classes a little bit, and influence things, or same thing with I think residential suburban office space is very attractive right now. Not the big stuff in the downtown corridors that everybody's talking about being vacant, but because people are now flocking to the suburbs, they're still looking for places to go, potentially to rent, small furnished office space. That's another amenity, right? You lease somebody an office on a monthly basis, and to your building, they're paying you rent, and then they go back home and they live in one of your units. It's, again, it just goes back to providing value to the community and just improving the overall lifestyle and experience of the neighborhood.
Yeah, they just complement each other well. And if a tenant says they don't have a job and they can't pay rent, well, actually, I know this store down the street has plenty of jobs. So
I love it, man. I love it. Well, and to your point, like regarding the idea that, box retail is going to be decimated. I mean, I think that as e-commerce is becoming more of a dependable way that we do our retail shopping and things like that. I mean, you could go down, I know at least where we're at, right, Brian, is Houston, and most of these metro areas around Texas, you can go to any shopping center, they're all filled. Like, all the retail centers are still there. Yeah, maybe some of the names may change, or whatever the businesses may change, but all of these buildings are still full. They're still leased out by a small business. I mean, I think there's something to be said. I don't think brick and mortar retail is going to be just completely wiped off the face. So to your point, I think there's some opportunity there if going down those waters, so to speak.
Yeah, I think retail is changing, in my opinion. I don't know what your thoughts are on it. We're mostly talking about multifamily, but I think retail is going to adapt. I don't think it's going to die. I don't think any of these asset classes, even office space, maybe it'll scale down, or these things have been around for generations and been very successful business model, and they're a need, to be honest, for a lot of large and small businesses. So I think they're going to adapt. Retail centers that maybe historically had very large footprints are going to scale down to a model that's a much smaller footprint that is more e-commerce driven, to where you can still go in the store and sort of touch stuff, but at the end of the day, it's really just a hub, a distribution center for some of their products for you to pick it up online, right? So I think that's what we're going to start to see, and I think we'll start seeing creative spaces. I know I'm starting to see things around here in Houston where you've got these 1,500 square feet spaces in triple net shopping centers, and big box, big name developers are subdividing them. So you're getting 500-600 square feet, and they're getting creative with the leases and the tenants that can go in there just to make it more affordable in some of these A-class neighborhoods. So I think it's going to be interesting to see, but there's definitely opportunity.
Yeah. And I think people, now that we're getting out of COVID a bit, they want to go places. They want to go to these places. They've been cooped up. And I think also with retail, you'll see more experience type places, like salons and getting a haircut, and massage places, and I don't know, sort of entertainment type things start to do really well.
Coffee shops.
Coffee shops. Coffee shops. Yeah. Could actually have a business meeting at a coffee shop. Weird, right?
Yeah, I'd say Brian knows all too well about the coffee shops. He opened his second coffee location, right before right on the brink of COVID, actually
Yeah, we
shutting
opened our
everything down.
second coffee shop March 5th, 2020, and the national pandemic was issued, March 15th, I
Yeah.
believe.
Something like
So
that.
perfect timing. I planned it just right.
But
Is it
now,
doing a
like,
lot better now?
yeah,
Oh yeah. Things are definitely on the open up. So
What's it
Yeah.
called?
it's called Blockhouse.
Blockhouse. Cool. Well, maybe I'll have an Oklahoma location for you soon.
Hey,
Oh, there you go, Brian. Look, franchising, buddy. There you go.
there we go.
Well, Jonathan, in speaking to this conversation of both multifamily and retail, I know you said on the retail side, you guys are going to take that on internally before, I guess, giving opportunities to your investor database. But to those that are investing with you on the multifamily side, how are you conditioning your database to kind of wrap their minds around, hey, this is what we're seeing in the multifamily space. This is the type of return expectations we're seeing. Here's what we're doing on the retail side, just as a diversification, so to speak. How are you conditioning your database, and what's the response that you're seeing?
Well, I mean, the retail thing was literally an idea like a week or two ago, so I haven't even talked to anyone about that yet. This is probably the first time I'm publicly even saying anything about it.
Surprise.
Yeah. But right now we like with our investors, we're just geared up for multifamily stuff. We go through our past deals, and I share how we're doing on our first property, and we just did our second distribution, and for the second quarter, we're beating for that quarter based on projections. We're beating that quarter by 60%, 34% overall. So we're doing really well because rents and occupancy have been a lot higher and doing a lot better than we initially anticipated. But yeah, we're at, since we've been independently successful, we do not need to do the next deal. So we just condition them to be patient and know that when we bring them something, it's actually fully vetted and going to be a really good deal, not based on bloated numbers or anything, on actually conservative, like well thought out by every line item expense that's vetted because of our experience now through our PM and just kind of what we're seeing in the marketplace.
Quality over quantity. I love that approach.
Yep.
Yeah.
Less is more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jonathan, are you seeing, or how, I guess I was looking for something a little bit more specific. I don't know if you were going there, Cody, but I was curious about the 10-year hold model. A lot of investors in general, especially passive investors, and I'm not sure if you're raising, large amounts of capital, but they're conditioned. The market is conditioning them to 3 to 5 year holds, and it's sort of their expectation from other operators, right? So if you're coming in and you're the 7 to 10 year guy, are you having a hard time attracting capital and investors with that, or is it just a different niche, different investor you're looking for, and how are you sort of handling those challenges?
I think we attract that person that wants to hold longer term, first of all, but yeah, I basically tell them you're gonna get most of your money back within 5 years because we're gonna be able to refinance, and you're still in a deal that's cash flowing well, and then you can move that capital into future deals and kind of like keep that going. And I have like I did like a spreadsheet where what $100,000 investment could look like in our deals within a 12-year period, and you're five times your money by reinvesting all the money you're making into deals as we refinance. So you could get into about like 4 deals within that time frame.
Velocity of money, right?
Yeah, velocity, compounding upon compounding, and while you're still in these 4 deals that are appreciating with natural forces and things that we're doing. And we could also refinance again in year 10 if we've kind of improved it that much more. So we could keep on like recycling that money. And that's the point, that your 100K could go quite far if you keep it with us and you keep investing and selling kind of that story and that we were successfully doing that. I think they can wrap their heads around that, and it makes a lot of sense. And for long-term wealth, it's actually a much better strategy and in their best interest.
I agree.
Yeah, I was going to mention that same thing. I think when you look at this as investors, I mean, we should always be considering that long-term wealth preservation, right? And when you talk about these longer-term holds, I mean, that fits right into line with that philosophy, right? Is, and look, what an ideal
with
situation.
healthy growth.
With healthy growth, right? I mean,
and tax incentives.
That's right. And
Yeah.
and I mean, there's something to be said about opportunities like this where you can be in it for a long term, but eventually be in a position where all of your equities return, and then you still have an ownership share, and at that point, it's an infinite return, right? So that's the golden goose, I guess, when it comes to real estate investing, right? So
you want a handful of cash cows, and over time, you won't have to lift a finger anymore, and that's kind of what we're selling.
Yeah, I like that, man. And I think, again, another word of wisdom there for anybody that's considering passively investing, looking at the quality over quantity, looking at the long-term strategy and making sure that's a fit. But I think the way that you guys are modeling this is a perfect way for wealth preservation, long-term wealth appreciation, I guess is the right word.
And growth. Yeah.
And growth. Yeah. So,
and one last thing I would say with that, and because we come from the flip world, we kind of took a 180 because we intimately know what it is to flip. And yeah, you make good money, but like you got to keep moving it, keep doing deals. And with this method, we could still kind of get to the same place with doing less deals that are just create more wealth and create more long-term cash flow for you over a longer period of time.
Yeah. See, and I think that just goes to your experience, right? That speaks to your experience. And I think that's where, investors beware right now in this market. There's a ton of syndicators out there. There's a ton of these value add models coming out where you're still seeing these very aggressive assumptions. Just proceed with caution right now. I think connecting with guys like you, Jonathan, that are really just focusing on quality over quantity, long-term wealth preservation. Again, these are the guys that you really want to be networking with and talking to, and love what you guys are doing. So
yeah, and sorry, one last thing I'll add to that. My parents got hit pretty hard during the last recession, so that's kind of in the back of my mind. Like, we're always not paranoid about it, but definitely that's in the back of my mind that at any time values could come down, and then that exit might not be a possibility because it just won't make sense. So if you're able to keep on holding to get through that fluctuation in the market, and still be cash flowing, you're in a pretty good safe spot that even a big hit in the market won't be a big deal, as long as rents obviously don't take a huge hit. But historically, even during recessions, rents don't take a hit. A lot of times they might even go up because people are becoming more renters at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, Brian, I know you mentioned this in reading Jonathan's bio, right? Wanting to dive into kind of starting his investing career in the heart of the recession, Great Recession, right? But I think this is where, when you talk about looking or vetting sponsors and looking at experience, everybody probably will use whatever metrics to equate what that experience looks like. And I mean, granted, we don't say that, okay, you have to have been through a last economic downturn or blah, blah, blah. But I do think there's something to be said about, like you said, your parents' experience going through the Great Recession, you starting out your business and going through that. And then now you're able to apply that to your business today and hedge against your downside exposure with these strategies you're implementing. So I think that's huge when you talk about looking for somebody who's experienced. So
yeah,
kudos.
It's all about mitigating risk as much as possible, for sure. But yeah, I feel that pain intimately from that time that I'll never forget it.
Well, unfortunately, we learned the best lessons through those experiences like that. But if you stick it out long enough and you just apply those lessons learned, you're going to be successful.
Better off.
That's right. That's right. So, well, Jonathan, man, we covered a lot of ground here. I know we didn't get to go down a whole bunch of rabbit holes in detail, but we covered a lot of different ground. You've offered a lot of great nuggets here. So before we wrap up, got a few more questions for you, man, and we'll call it a show. But
let's do it.
What do you like to do for your continued education to further your own investing?
I just, I read a lot of articles that are coming out on the different commercial news sources, videos. I do a weird thing where I read books that have nothing to do with real estate, but it helps me process like my thoughts and how I'm thinking of things. That it helps me come up with ideas, especially for content, because I put a weekly blog out there. I put out a lot of content, but it's hard continue to think of new good topics to write about in a unique and interesting way that people find useful. So always trying to find ways to kind of spur my brain to think of these things. And I also on Twitter, I put out content there every single day on Twitter about things I'm learning and little nuggets that I kind of come across every day.
Awesome, man. Excellent.
Yeah.
What have been some of the lasting lessons you've learned along your journey?
I would say checklist. Doing 400 flips, there's been some that have not gone so well, and having checklists so you don't miss things and mitigate risk as much as possible. And there's just no way to remember everything. So you need to write things down to be able to, okay, yeah, did we do this? Did we do that? Okay, we don't move forward until everything on this list is checked off. And if it's not, we just have to not move forward then. So number one, and then choosing your partners and investors wisely, because we've had deals not go so well where investors were not easy to work with, that made the situation worse than it needed to be. So I think having the right team and the right people that you're investing with. So like when we talk to investors, we're vetting them as much as they're vetting us, to be honest.
That's a big one. That's a real big one. That's a good one. So
yeah,
it's a lot of good nuggets in that one sentence there, like that. So
yeah.
All right, Jonathan, what advice would you give to the listeners to help them grow their businesses?
As like other syndicators or just anyone in general?
Whoever you want to speak to, man. What would be some advice you'd give to the general audience?
I would just remember that, money's not everything, and having balance in life is very important. I've dealt with mental health issues in the past. And so, family is very important, keeping physically fit. I go on a lot of walks where it helps me actually think things through. And so I think having balance in life is super important, and actually makes you a better investor because you have a clearer mind, you have more motivation, you have more energy, and you make better decisions, in my opinion.
It's great advice, man. Yeah, great advice. So you have to take care of yourself before you can take care of your business. So I like that. So
yeah.
All right, Jonathan. Well, tell the audience how they can learn more about you and get connected with you.
Yeah, follow me on Twitter. You can look up my name or at JB2 Investments. You can also go to our website, jb2investments.com. And we also have an ebook on there. It's called the Tax Stack Strategy, and it's about the tax incentives of real estate, 1031 exchanges, investing in retirement funds, and about accelerated depreciation and how you can use those depreciation losses to offset other income and not really ever pay taxes on the money you're making on our investments.
Awesome, man. Well, we'll definitely make sure that's in the show notes. We appreciate you sharing that resource. Great to get to know you over the past several months, man. Keep crushing it. Look forward to staying connected.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, guys. It was fun.
Thanks for tuning in, buddy.
Yeah.